Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies, where we explore all things cinema. I want to welcome back to the show Brandon Davis, who is the host of the wonderful podcast Front Row Classics. Brandon, welcome back. Thanks for joining me again.
Thanks so much, Robert. It's a pleasure being back.
It's great to have you, and we're diving into Joan Crawford territory slash John Garfield, two of my favorites. I'll just read a brief synopsis if people haven't seen it or if they haven't seen it for a while. A classical musician from a working class background is sidetracked by his love for a wealthy socialite. This was directed by Jean Negulesco. It was written by Clifford Odets as well as Zachary Gold, and it starred Joan Crawford, John Garfield, Oscar Levant, J. Carol Naish, I believe it is, Joan Chandler. It's got a Ruth Nelson. It's got a large, great supporting cast. Okay, so Brendan, tell me, had you seen the film before, and if so, what did you think?
I've definitely seen the film before. I told you it'd been a little while since I'd seen it, but I love this is my favorite period of Crawford, this period at Warner Brothers from Mildred Pierce through like The Damned Don't Cry, Flamingo Road. So like 1945 to 1950. I think she was at her best during this era. And I think this movie is really special and really unique, and I think that she gives one of her greatest performances. As well as it's funny, I last time I was on, you and I talked John Garfield too with Postman Always Rings Twice. So it's funny getting to see him. This is the movie he did right after that.
Yeah.
So
Oh
it's
God, I didn't even put that together. I was like,
yeah.
I was thinking there's a connection with what we did last time with Brandon for some reason. How did that so obvious? I don't know why I just couldn't think it through. But yeah, you're right. And this was
Yeah.
also his last Warner Brothers film. I
Mhm.
just heard that this morning in a podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, I it's so interesting because on paper I don't know that you would necessarily think Joan Crawford and John Garfield would be a good pair just because you think of Garfield as sort of the precursor to the method actors that would come just a little later, Marlon Brando, Montgomery Clift, guys like that. And she is the ultimate studio movie star. So you wouldn't think necessarily they would work together, but they spark in this movie, and they are really, it's this combustible chemistry between the two of them. And I think that he brings out something in her that she doesn't always bring to the table in every movie. And I'm a Crawford fan, but she delves deep
Yeah.
into some of these scenes, and it's really remarkable to see that. And it's just an interesting story, especially if you're a fan of classical music and you're a fan of that kind of musicianship. It's also got that going for it because it takes time out of the movie to actually give you some classical film performances while also advancing plot through other means. But no, it's just a really stylish, really, really great melodrama. And it's a melodrama in kind of the best sense of the word. I think at some point in Hollywood, the word melodrama became kind of a dirty word. But if you do a melodrama right, it can be so fantastic. And this is one of those great examples of it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And just piggybacking on what you said about Garfield being a precursor to the method actors that
Mhm.
were to come. I recently I had a guest on who wrote a book all about how method acting was received in the
Mhm.
press and how it's evolved over time. And Garfield was part of was part of the focus of the book was on him. And
Mhm.
at the time, even though he literally, as you know, was a method actor, he was from
Right.
theater, but he was not marketed that way to audiences. He was marketed as like a noir, not that they said noir at the time, but like, crime thrillers and tough. He played tough guys and stuff like that. And it wasn't really until after he died that
Mhm.
then they started to market people like Brando, James Dean coming out of the actors studio
Yeah.
as like method actors. So, but he really was like the first quote unquote
Mhm.
method actor star. But you're right. I mean, the way in which they play off each other is stunning. And I agree with you. I mean, I love her. I think she was an incredible actor, but this is probably my favorite of her performances. and films. And I only just saw it for the first time about 3.5 years ago, because one of
Hmm.
the things I do for my Patreon members, it's a little different now, but I influence from Eddie Muller doing like noir or not videos.
Yeah,
Love that. And so I was doing noir or not. Now I do neo noir or not, just to mix it up, make it a like,
sure.
just because the neo noir has not, at least I haven't seen it written about as much as the classic period. So to me, it's like, just a way to sort of explore more of the neo noir and like, what do we
Hmm.
consider neo noir or not kind of thing. And I put humoresque on the list because I found it on some noir lists, and I saw it, and that was my first experience of it, and I loved it. And it's interesting that because it's sort of, I wouldn't consider it noir, but it's like, I
No.
would say it's like noir stained, I suppose. Like, it does have some of the dark lighting, use of shadow and light,
Hmm.
particularly in the first scene, which is really the last scene, because it's a
Yeah.
flashback, the whole film, like noir.
Hmm.
But other than some of the style of photography and some of the structure, the flashback structure, I'm not really sure why. I mean, it's a tragic story, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't consider it noir. I could see that you wouldn't either, based on your, your reaction.
No, I feel like, and thinking about like what Eddie Muller would say, I feel like he would say something like it's got noir elements,
Yeah.
but it doesn't constitute a noir as a whole, I don't think. Like I said, I think it much more fits within the realm of melodrama. Just because I think that it really delves into more romantic relationships. It delves more into the psyche of human beings. It delves into so many different things. And I think also just the classical musical element kind of takes it out of the world of noir a little bit too. So yeah, I think it kind of definitely it looks like noir, but when you're finished with the story and everything, I think melodrama probably is more apropos.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's so operatic,
Yes.
Uh,
Hmm.
and you're right. I mean, it's. I mean, noir, like you said, noir is it has noir touches, and noir.
Hmm.
There certainly are a number of psychological ones, but this one is
Hmm.
really about these relationships
Hmm.
and exploring, for me, a number of things. For one thing, the ambition it takes to be any kind of an artist, whether I mean, in his case, he's a violinist, but whether you want to be a director or an actor, a painter, whatever, your ambition has to be so big, and you see his commitment to practicing from a young age, constantly, the things in which he sacrificed, the things in which he focused on. But at the same time, I mean, I really believe all artists really need to be dreamers, which may be people
Hmm.
who are more secure or conventional or security, think in a very secure way about life. They would consider, that to be like, oh, well, you're naive. But I guess you could say it's subconsciously or unintentionally naive. Like, you really have to be. But I love how as he gets older, it sort of catches up to him. He's like, I didn't realize I had to do all this work. And you see how Oscar Levant is his mentor who's been around. He's the one who says, yeah, no, you got to get a manager. You got to put on a show, and all that goes into it. And
Hmm.
so that really irritates him, and myself as an actor, yeah, you're so focused for years on the art, but then once the business hits you, um, it can hurt, and it's hard.
Hmm.
I'm near it, and very, very hard. You always know it's hard, but it's harder than you could ever think, and you really see that in the film. I mean, it really shows you what it's like to be an artist. Did that resonate with you?
I think absolutely, and how being an artist sometimes can isolate you from even the people you love because his family, as much as he loves his family, and it's difficult to be an artist because especially during times like the Great Depression, in which the early scenes take place during, um
Mm,
you're expected to be more pragmatic, and you're expected to be more roll
yes.
up your sleeves and do something logical and do something productive. And unfortunately, some of the world doesn't see artistry as that. Whereas those of us that do live, within the world of arts, we know how enriching it is and how important it is for the soul, and what an important service art is, whether it's music, film, theater, whatever it is. But it can come across as selfish if you're especially in a time like he's living in with his family in the Great Depression. And so he makes the choice to sort of go out on his own so that he's not in their way anymore. And he's one less mouth to feed because, you've got the scene where his father, played by J. Carrol Naish, is doing the books, and he realizes that, his son is not contributing and the bills are piling up. And so he makes that difficult decision. And so, yeah, it really, the movie, especially in the first half, really gives you how much of a struggle it is to be an artist at times.
Yeah, certainly, certainly. And then, like you said, the sacrifices that one often has to make. And then, it really resonated with me because, hey, we all well, hopefully we all fall in love at one time or another. And then
Mhm.
and well, with that, you need to give yourself to people. You can't just be a taker, or else it'll blow up. And
Mhm.
we see that that's really what he's wrestling with, because it's his ambition versus his love for this woman, Helen, played by Joan Crawford. And I mean, it made me laugh on the one sense because he really was. I mean, you could see that she's interested in him, but he was really the one pursuing her. And then when she
Yes.
eventually gives in, then he backs off. And I'm like, typical guy, But I mean, it's because his mother was like, she's so supportive and
Mhm.
like, hey, you got to focus on your career. This woman's quote unquote trouble. She's
Mhm.
had a few marriages already, and that scares him, right? And he backs off, but then eventually, he can't help it. He really is absolutely in love with this woman. Uh,
Mhm.
but what I thought was so interesting is that it certainly has that layer of that he is hesitant to be totally committed to her because of his
Mhm.
ambition. You see that scene where she eventually decides to leave her husband. She goes to his practice, writes a note, hands it to an usher to give to him, and he just crumples it up, which is like, oh, I've got big news, and he just crumples it up, and then you see how that
Yeah.
devastates. But I think, on the one hand, yes, it's he's concerned about his career, but I think on the other hand, on a subconscious level, I think he was worried about her alcoholism, which is another
Yes.
theme of the film. Because even before he's met her at that party, and he meets her husband first, and he says, "Oh, I heard she drinks like a fish." And so he is aware that she's this heavy drinker. But then
Mhm.
later in the film, once he becomes very involved with her, he denies it to others. Oh, she doesn't have. But I do think there is that layer of he is concerned that she's got a real problem, that it's really above over his head. I mean, was that your impression?
Oh yeah, I think so. And what really fascinates me is how much buildup there is for the Crawford character coming in, because I'm like, she's top billed in the movie and she doesn't come in until a half
Yes.
hour into
Right.
the movie. But yeah, I think you're totally right. I think that he definitely thinks of her in that way, and she's the kind of woman that he grew up really not having any
Yeah,
kind
not at
of
all. She's from a
exposure
different
to.
world. Yeah.
Yeah, and to me, what got me, especially this time, was how blatant it is of how much she sort of flaunts and uses her sexuality in so many ways. I mean, she's surrounded by all those men in the beginning scenes, and they make no bones about it. I mean, these are her boy toys, basically,
Yeah.
and she uses sex as sort of currency, I guess you could say. But no, it's such an interesting such an interesting relationship. And you're right, kind of about the turn where he's so into her at the beginning, and then once she finally, because she's afraid to really say that she loves him
Yeah,
because she doesn't want, she knows how self-destructive she is, and how much she can sort of bring down those around her. And then, by the time by the time she really does decide to sort of form a relationship with him, they're kind of in it with both feet, and I think he kind of regrets that.
yeah. No, I completely agree. And I like the fact that they didn't feel the need to like explain the root of her alcoholism,
No.
or they don't feel the need to explain, like she takes these things really badly. I mean,
Mhm.
to the point, spoiler alert, I mean, we're all spoilers on my show, but I mean, she commits suicide over her feeling that he is not going to commit to her, or perhaps you could say she feels as though she's destroying him in one sense, or that
Mhm.
maybe she thinks she's getting in the way of his career. I mean, the poor woman, she goes to his mother for help towards the end, thinking like, what do I do? Like, I mean, I don't blame her. She's concerned for her son. She doesn't know the depths of this woman's problems, and she's like, leave him alone. He's got to focus, and she's totally alone. But they don't. I'm no expert on alcoholism, but God, I mean that she sunk that low over this relationship and then killed herself. I mean, it really forces the audience to ask themselves, um, well, not or not even necessarily ask yourself, but just accept the mystery of her as well. She's very mysterious
Mhm.
because we really only know so much about her. I mean, was that
Yeah.
a question, or what did you
I
think?
think so, I think so because we are, as the audience, we are very much more in tune of how John Garfield's character
Right,
ticks.
right.
And so we're kind of looking at her sort of, even though we do have, even though we as the audience get to see her in private, intimate moments, we're really much more seeing her through Garfield's eyes. And I think that that's part of the
That's true. Yeah,
really, really great strengths of the screenplay by Clifford Odets, who is, genius writer. Um, yeah, I think that it really sort of is one of the strengths of the piece to where she is kind of this mysterious package, that you can't quite pinpoint and you can't quite
right.
really figure her out. And I think that that's what's so great about Crawford in this role too, is that she's willing to make herself, when you think of Joan Crawford, you think of strength and you think of a towering presence. And in this movie, she's willing to make herself so vulnerable,
Yeah,
which is so fascinating. I think of the scene in the bar where she's singing, she's trying to sing Embraceable You along with the piano player, and it just comes across as so desperate and
yeah,
so sad. And yeah, it's just an amazing, amazing portrayal of this character. And when you look at her on the outside, she's Joan Crawford. She's never going to look like what you would think an alcoholic is going to look like. She's always going to be well coiffed and well put together. But just you see her inner battles and her inner struggles on the inside of all of the self-doubt that just plagues her, and we don't know where that comes from. And I think that that's what's so great, because you can watch this movie so many different times and always come out with maybe a different theory as to why she is the way she is.
yeah. Well said. Well said. And isn't that so often the case where again, I'm no expert on suicide as well,
Yeah.
but where people say, I remember once going to a funeral of someone who killed themselves, and I remember some of the family just saying, we didn't see it coming, or we don't really understand.
Hmm.
But isn't that so true? Like the audience is left. I mean, we see why,
Yeah.
it almost see. I mean, I don't mean to say that it's not. I mean, it is believable, but there's part of you that there's something just mysterious about it, that she would sink this low, um, over this relationship, that didn't necessarily. It's not as if though they broke up. It just that, yeah, they're hitting some problems, but man, she takes but
Hmm.
at the same time, you understand she left her husband, she's been divorced a few times, and like she just can't take another relationship potentially um ending. So but I agree with you. I mean, her vulnerability in this, I mean, God, when she's drinking at the end and she's on the phone with him right
Mhm.
before he does his
Yeah.
concert, and then she goes to the beach and goes into the water. I mean, God, those close-ups and just everything about it is so emotional. The use of music, the use of POV. I mean, we feel that we're her, like it's eye level as she enters the ocean. And I mean, I thought the way that was cut, blocked, shot, the use of music, you literally feel as though you are walking in that water. I mean, it's stunning.
Yeah, and it's very dreamlike, and it's very on the first viewing, it's kind of like, is she really doing this? Is she dreaming this? Do we really know? And then it takes you, and then finally, once you realize what's going on, you're like, oh, she really did do it. And you're right. I kind of, it's interesting because like you talked about, he's a very different man than the kind of men she's had relationships with in the past. I mean, you think about her, she's kind of married these older men. And so this was a bit deeper maybe than what she was used to. And she's probably thinking, well, if this failed, I'm never going to be able to have any kind of relationship that's ever going to work potentially. So I can imagine that. But no, you're right. That scene where she kills herself is so amazingly done. And it's from a director, Jean Negulesco,
Yeah,
who directed some good movies, How to Marry a Millionaire, and he directed Titanic with Barbara Stanwyck, and he directed
Conquest with
Three Coins in a Fountain, Johnny Belinda. But he's not one of your Hitchcocks or Billy Wilders or Frank Capra's or John Huston's.
yeah.
Um,
He's underrated though. So I
but
mean,
yeah, he
I
did some
wouldn't
great
keep him
work.
on. Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't put him maybe on the level of those other filmmakers, but he is not discussed very much. And he made like City for Conquest is another one with Cagney I really
Mhm.
like.
Yeah.
Really, he's got some really Roadhouse, some really interesting films. But I don't know,
Mhm.
he's not, which is a shame because he did some really good movies.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the movie, it's interesting. I was watching it again this time. I was like, yeah, it's 2 hours and 4 minutes, but it doesn't feel like it when
Oh,
you watch it because you really get from the minute of the opening scene where you see, those close-ups of Garfield and all of that shadowy ambiance and everything. It really just grabs you from the very beginning, and it's like a great novel where you just want to keep turning the page to see what happens next.
yeah. Yeah, well said. Well said. And the another noir connection with this, particularly that first scene, which is so, the use of shadow and light, is the DOP is Ernest Haller, who did Mildred Pierce. Uh,
Yes.
he also did, I didn't know this, Gone with the Wind, The Roaring Twenties, and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
Yeah.
Did a lot of really big films, but the other scene that when we see that initially he had this potential romance with this woman named Gina, another fellow
Hmm.
musician, and you see how devastated she is that clearly he doesn't love her, he loves Helen. And that scene where they meet, Helen meets Gina, and she and poor Joan as Helen, like, just the jealousy right away, and she just storms off. And like, my God, this woman is just, she is extremely vulnerable.
And that's kind of the scene I think where you first start to realize, okay, this woman has her issues, but then you're like, oh, I think she really has a problem because
Yeah,
she can't even like stand to be in the same room
right.
with Gina. And when as a person on the outside looking in, you're like, what on earth does Joan Crawford and this woman have to be jealous about with Gina, who's a perfectly lovely woman, but she's no Joan Crawford. She's not as charismatic. She's not as, towering figure. So it really is interesting. That's kind of the linchpin moment, I feel like, and it's played really well because Crawford just walks in and man, she just gets out immediately, and it just kind of you blink and you miss her almost.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I also, like I said with Oscar Levant, I haven't seen him in. I know he was also a well-known musician. I know very little about him, but man, is he good in this. I mean, he is so he's so funny, and that relationship I mean, he taught him how to play the violin.
Hmm.
He was his mentor. Later, he was his pianist. His character's named Sid Jeffers. He
Hmm.
so just that dry sense of humor is so spot on, and the
Hmm.
chemistry between him and Garfield, again, the mentor men
Yeah.
relationship is, because he's not someone who's, even though he's older and he hasn't had a lot of success, he pokes fun at himself about that, but he's not jaded. He doesn't discourage Paul or anything. He's just honest with him
Hmm.
about how hard it is to be a musician. And I thought that was strong because every artist needs a mentor, and I thought having Sid was a real help to Paul. I mean, how did you
Hmm.
just feel about their dynamic?
Oh, he's great because it's funny because Garfield and Oscar Levant, they're similar kind of in their look, but in terms of like their stature and the way that they carry themselves, they're so different. And he is a great mentor because he never really sugarcoats anything. And like you were talking before, he really lets him know what the musician's life is and what you need to do in order to get ahead. And he doesn't really he brings the humor when he needs to. And yeah, he's that great sort of foil, that person because John Garfield, he's going to listen to his parents, but he's not really ever going to maybe put into practice because he's too independent and
Yeah,
he's got much of that artist head. So where you need Sid, you need the Oscar Levant character to really get through to him
yeah.
at times. And so yeah, that relationship is one of my favorites in the movie. And I'm a huge Oscar Levant fan, and I think that he's a great addition to whatever movie he's in. And he just brings that wry, incredible wit, and he just has such history. He was one of George Gershwin's best friends and plays himself in the movie Rhapsody in Blue, which came out the year before this.
Yeah, I'm just looking at him. Yeah, he was in 16. There's 16 films.
He's in stuff like An American in Paris and The Bandwagon and Romance on the High Seas, a lot of musicals.
Okay, yeah, because the only one I've seen here is American in Paris. Yeah, because I haven't seen Rhapsody in Blue. But I'll have to see more work with him.
Yeah,
I mean, I really love. I mean, he is perfect in this.
yeah, he's always a nice addition to any
Yeah,
movie.
yeah. But everyone is. I mean, the support. I thought Ruth Nelson as his mother, Esther Boret. As I mean, there's a great cut to where um
Mhm.
Helen comes up, and it's the first time we see that Esther clearly is worried about this, and they just cut to her close up looking at Paul like sternly. And I mean, I love that, but she was so supportive of his career. And the father, it's funny because he was so against him becoming a musician, but then really as he became successful, he just
Yes.
goes with it. Which is it's like, hey, well, if you're succeeding at it, then and it's power to you. But I'm actually that actor. I'm not. That's J. Carroll Naish.
Hmm.
I don't know how familiar you are with him.
Yeah, I mean, a great character actor that shows up in
Yeah.
tons and tons of movies. Normally, I think he was normally pigeonholed playing Italian men. But although he does, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that yes, he does. He plays Sitting Bull in Annie Get Your Gun, which is
Oh, okay.
which is not the most sensitive casting, I'll say. But he plays Italians in movies, but no, he always is very funny and usually brings a lot of levity to movies. So he does that here, and I do love that aspect of it to where he's so against the artistry and what his son is trying to do, but then yeah, once he becomes successful and once he's attached himself to a rich lady, yeah, it's fine. But I love Ruth Nelson as Esther, like you said, because it takes a strong actress to hold her own in scenes with performers like John Garfield and Joan Crawford, and she does it
Yeah, yeah.
very, very well. You talked about the Crawford scene, and one of the scenes that always stands out to me is when they are in his apartment and and John Garfield and his mother get into the argument and she ends up slapping him
Yeah.
and and it just breaks her heart that she does that, but it's come to that because she so wants to protect him from this woman, and it's a really great performance on her part, and she doesn't come across as sort of like the overbearing mother that you see in so many movies. She's got these incredible levels to her where sometimes she's the doting caring mother, sometimes she is the tough overprotective mother, and she plays them all well.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. And I didn't I was searching Joan Chandler earlier and I was like, oh, she was in Rope, which she was
That's the only thing I really know her for.
yeah, and there's a great scene here where they're all watching Paul play, and it just again the way it's shot and cut, and the non-verbal moments where you know exactly what everyone's thinking
Mhm.
and experiencing, and they show them all watching. And if you if you know, there's a great visual touches and where Joan is holding the program, but she's kind of holding it like this, and
Yes.
you just see a picture of Garfield. It's almost like she's got him, you know.
Mhm.
And they keep cutting to the mother watching him, and then Gina. Sorry, the mother watching Joan, and then Gina watching Joan as
Mhm.
Helen as well. And then Gina just bursts into tears and walks out. And I just thought that, like in those few minutes of just those look, the way it's shot and cut, you know exactly what everyone is thinking and feeling and experiencing. I
Mhm.
absolutely love that. And then, of course, the early one is when she's got that glass at the party, Joan, and she's holding it, and of course, we can see through the glass, and Garfield is his whole figure in the distance is complete
Yeah.
in that glass. You know what a
Mhm.
metaphor. Like she's got him, she's gonna get him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's sublime. It's sublime.
There's so many incredible visuals
Yeah.
in the movie, and just so many. I love the way that Negulesco frames Crawford so much. I think in that scene, right before she kills herself, where she throws the glass into the window and
Oh,
breaks it,
right, right.
and then the camera cuts to her looking through it. I
Yeah,
mean, that is an incredible shot,
yeah,
and it just it's an incredible, just sort of incredible visual metaphors and just things like that. But no, also what got me this time was just watching it because I've always known the story that it's not really John Garfield playing the violin. It's like
right.
three different people.
Yeah, I was wondering how the hell did they do that? Because it literally looks like he's playing, and
Yeah.
I actually because I know you said you have the Blu-ray, and I just
Mhm.
got this. Gee, I got a virtual background, so it's kind of
I can see it. Yeah.
yeah, there we go. But there's a great like 10 or so featurette where they talk about really I'd recommend getting it because they talk so much about the music, which is like a character in the
Yeah.
film, and they really show Garfield playing a lot. Which I thought was great because it really shows who he was and his passion, and the
Mhm.
music is beautiful and speaks to the character's interior lives so well. But yeah, they said, they got one, like he had to place his hands behind his back, Garfield, and then you have one musician with doing the fingering on the piano, and then the other one
Mhm.
with the bow. And I just thought, how the
Yeah.
hell, like that to me sounds like it would be a disaster, but it
Yeah. It works.
it
It
didn't
works.
even know how to play. I mean, wow, Garfield,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, it works. I think there's another Warner Brothers movie. I think it's Deception with Betty Davis and Paul Henreid and Claude Rains, where I think Paul Henreid has to be, I forget what instrument he plays in that, but they do sort of the same thing with that, where it's like four
yeah,
different people playing the instrument, and it's amazing how good it looks in this movie. And the musical advisor on this movie is one of the great violinists in history, Isaac Stern,
yeah,
and I think that's his hand is one of them. I believe. I don't know if he was doing the fingering or if
yeah,
he was working with the bow, but yeah, it really is something. And the music just heightens the movie. And you used the word operatic
yeah.
earlier, and that's exactly what it feels like. It just feels so, every emotion is heightened because so much of it is playing, is having that music playing as the backdrop.
Yeah. Yeah, oh, for sure. For sure. And even from a performance standpoint, I mean, you do a lot of acting and that must have been so you could relate to that. Could you imagine if you had to be Garfield where you got two guys playing a violin, but you have to also show on your face what the character's bringing to it emotionally without actually playing. I mean, that must have been very
Yeah.
strange.
I cannot imagine because it would I can't because having your hands tied behind your back and then having like someone
Yeah.
off to your side, someone underneath you, that would be I can't imagine how uncomfortable or awkward it was, but like you said, when you watch the final product, you would never know.
You would never know. Yeah, because I didn't know that till I read it. I
Yeah.
had figured, okay, there's no way he could have played that well. I thought maybe he was playing sometimes and because sometimes it's a long shot. So I was like, okay, that's a
Mhm.
double, clearly. But I was wondering how I knew they must have done something, but if
Yeah.
really it's convincing, totally convincing
Hmm.
that it's
Yeah.
um was there anything else you wanted to mention about the film?
Oh my goodness. What's interesting is, well, first of all, I was trying to go back and thinking what my favorite like standout moment in the movie is, and I've talked about so many of them, but also where she and Garfield are sort of having their big confrontation in the restaurant in the bar, and it gets to where she slams her glass up against the wall. That's one of the great Crawford moments ever on screen for me, where she says, "I'd like to slap your face," and he says, "Why don't you try it?" And that's as close as she can get to really doing it, and that's just a powerful moment. And Garfield is like, he's not moving a muscle when she does that, and he has such control of his body, and that's the method actor in him at that point. And it's so funny, he brings that out in her so much in this movie, because she a lot of times Crawford, especially during this period, is working with more second tier leading men who are used to just sort of being props for really strong leading ladies. And so the fact that she's got someone who is really her equal in
Yeah.
this really helps her to raise her game. And yeah, it's so good. And I had read originally this movie was going to have Barbara Stanwyck in this role but before they gave it to Crawford. And I am a huge Stanwyck fan,
Me too.
but I'm glad Crawford got this, because it really gives her such an incredible role to really sink her teeth into and to really play around with her emotions so well. And we don't get to see that a whole lot from her, because a lot of times she's very in control of the Crawford image. But yeah, it's great. And it's so funny. She won, the Oscar just the year before this for Mildred Pierce, which, deservedly so. But this is a totally different character and a totally different performance.
Completely, completely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's really in a lot. I mean, I know now we have the Blu-ray of it, and I've seen
Mhm.
people write about it, but in a lot of ways, it's pretty underrated in her filmography, and even his. I
Yeah,
so
I think probably because like it came after two of their, but this comes
Right.
right after Postman for him, comes right after Mildred Pierce for her. So it was kind of probably got lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, 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 I think so. I again, I only saw it a few years ago for the first time. It has become it has landed on my top 100 list, certainly, because I love it that much. And a film that I have has always been one of my favorites is The Hustler with Paul Newman.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it occurred to me as I was making notes. I was like, The Hustler borrowed so must have either consciously or unconsciously borrowed a lot from this film because Newman in that, as Fast Eddie Felson, is so ambitious in
Yeah.
case it's Pool. He falls in love with this woman who's also an alcoholic. And
Yes.
and his ambition is so strong that she tries to warn him not so much about his ambition, but his relationship with the George C. Scott character. And she
Hmm.
also commits suicide.
That's right.
And he sort of in that case it's more clearly defined that he was like, oh god, my ambition was so strong. And that last scene where he says I lost her, I'm not quoting it directly, he's like, I lost her on a pool cue or something like that. I lost this woman to pool. And in other words, it wasn't worth it. And so it's so similar. In this case, it's a little it to me it's more complicated because that last scene, he says, you look, I'm not quoting it directly again, but Paul says, you when you think life is so simple, but it's not, and then you got to pay for who you are. And it's a shame
Mhm.
that he thinks he is being basically what's the word, punished for being so ambitious. But
Yeah.
I think that's just what he thinks. Because to me, I'm like, I don't see it that way. Because from an outside's view, it's like, you know what? This is life. These things happen. It's not his fault. He's not perfect. I don't think he can, but I think he's blaming himself,
Mhm.
and I couldn't help but wonder because apparently when his daughter died, I'm just interpreting this, but apparently he thought he was being punished by God, and I
Sure.
heard that Odets had taken things from his own personality and put into this. So again, this is just a theory, but I wonder if he was connecting that with his daughter who died.
Oh, I could definitely imagine. I could definitely imagine. Yeah, that there's so many interesting players that are involved in this movie that have so many interesting talents, and they all kind of come together to make this sort of really interesting movie that it's kind of an oddball movie that doesn't really, like we said, doesn't really fit any genre. It's kind of its own thing, and it's kind of an odd movie to come from Warner Brothers at that time, and it's fascinating. And yeah, I'm glad that it's more getting its due here in the last few years, because I think it really is worth diving into because there's a lot there.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, definitely. Because I've seen it now. I watched it the other night. This must have been my third or fourth time. Every time I see something
Mhm.
new, every time it's that. And the Blu-ray is great.
And the restoration is gorgeous. It is
Yeah, it is.
incredible black and white cinematography.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Can you talk a little bit about Front Row Classics and what your podcast is all about?
Yeah, so Front Row Classics is a podcast that I started actually, I don't know when this is going to drop, but coming up on June 26th will be my 10th anniversary
Oh,
of
congratulations.
doing, thank you, of doing the show. So trying to plan some special episodes. I'm still in the planning stages, we'll see, but if it's the same mission it was in the beginning, trying to just bring the love of classic film to my generation and now younger generations. Because when I started this, I was in my late 20s. Now I'm in my late 30s. But it's very, very heartening to me when I hear from people on social media, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, Blue Sky, wherever I am. To see teenagers, talking to me about classic film and loving it. And so I have a very, very nice, loyal listenership. I always say from 18 to 80. It ranges from all age groups, and most of the episodes are usually just me and another person talking about a movie, but I also have a nice rotation of wonderful guests who come on, authors and journalists and historians, and I get to interview some really interesting, great, fun people. Um, and I think that Robert and I were talking before we went on the air. I just released my recap of my trip to the TCM Film Festival, so you can hear that now. And also, I just released a new format that I'm trying out. Cassidy Krieger, who does a profile called Hollywoodland Photos on Instagram, she and I ranked our top 5 favorite Cary Grant performances,
Right.
which was a really fun episode. So you can hear that now. But I've got a couple of things coming up. You'll also get to hear me interview soon George Stevens Jr. About receiving the Robert Osborne Award at the TCM Film Festival, and then I know Robert, you recently released the interview with Alicia Malone about TCM imports, and I'll be releasing my episode soon. So that's just some of the stuff coming up.
I'm looking forward to that. And in all honesty, Brandon's show is really, really good. And as I've told you before, I discovered Brandon from researching other guests. I'd be like, I got this person coming on. I'd go onto Spotify search, Front Row Classics already there. So obviously our taste is in the same line.
Honestly, though, that's a smart thing to do because when I book a guest, I always go on to
Yeah,
YouTube or see other interviews that they've done,
yeah,
so I know what
research.
kind of a conversation we're going to have. Are they someone who is it a long-winded person? Do they give short answers? Because it helps you prepare the interview so much better.
Yeah, definitely. I do that all the time. And it's fun also to see, people like our age with that are really interested in
Yes.
not in this period, because
Hmm.
I too have, people that from maybe not as young as 18, but like, 25 to 65,
Yeah.
with the Google Analytics, you can see that, right? So
Hmm.
carrying it forward. If people want to follow you on social media or your show, where can they go?
Yeah, go to Instagram, FRN Classics Pod, Twitter, Front Row Classics Podcast. I'm on Blue Sky at FRN Classics. I am on Twitter at FRN Classics. If you have any questions, suggestions for me, email me, classicsfrn@gmail.com. And then anywhere you find your podcast, Spotify, Apple, anywhere, Front Row Classics Podcast.
Great, fantastic. And I will leave the links in the description box below for where you can follow Brandon on social media as well as check out his podcast. So, Brandon, thanks again. This was great.
This is
And
fun.
yeah, I look forward to having you back down the road.
Yes, absolutely.
And thank you all so much for watching. I want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you're interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, head over to the link patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies for full details. You can also leave a donation or what I call a tip by clicking the thanks link, which you will find directly below the video frame. Just click on that and you can leave a donation if you choose to. Of course, I would greatly appreciate that. And lastly, if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing. It is absolutely free to do so. By pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the movie logo, you will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left. In just a second, just click on that. And then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new videos. I would also really appreciate if you leave a comment, share the video, like the video. All of these things create traction onto my YouTube channel and really help share the video far and wide and the channel in general. So thank you so much for doing that, and I will see you all in the next one.